The noble titles used in the world of Greyhawk are a fascinating mix of real-world and made-up usages, and I want to talk about them today on Greyhawk Grognard. So, as I said, in the world of Greyhawk, there's a ton of different noble titles and royal titles and so forth, and some of them have real-world origins, like king, prince, baron, that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about those because those are obvious. But there are a bunch in here that don't have any real-world um, origin, or if they do, it means something a little different than it means in the world of Greyhawk. So it's those interesting little bits that I want to focus on in today's video. And if I could just right here at the start, please subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps. I would deeply appreciate it if you could subscribe and make sure you're getting the notifications when a new video drops. The numbers really do help when it comes to the algorithms and things. So that said, let's go through the list of titles. Like I say, I'm going to ignore the kings and princes and just go to the interesting ones. And right off the bat, we have Almor, the prelacy of Almor. A prelate is not an actual title in the real world. It is a clerical, ecclesiastical category. Like a bishop is a prelate, because a bishop controls a particular territory and has other priests and other prelates underneath him. So, like, an archbishop or a bishop or something like that would be a prelate, but nobody actually has the title. You are a prelate. In the world of Greyhawk, that's different. In the world of Greyhawk, we have his venerable mercy, Kevint, the prelate of Almor. So Gygax has turned a category into a specific title in this instance, which makes sense because it's a clerical state. Now, next up, we come to the Bandit Kingdoms, and this is a really interesting case because in the Bandit Kingdoms we have like 17 different titles because there's 17 different little Bandit Kings. There's a few normal ones in there. There's a king and some princes and lords and stuff like that. But I have it up here from Dragon Magazine number 63 where the bandits are. Unfortunately, I don't have the hard copy to show you handy. But just to go through the list, we have the Guardian General, which is a great title. The Baron. There's a Master, just a generic Master, which is kind of cool. And then we get to some interesting ones. We get Relt, R-H-E-L-T, Plar, P-L-A-R, and Zek, S-Z-E-K. And as far as I can tell, those don't have any real-world equivalencies. They're just made-up titles. And if anybody does recognize where any of those came from, please do let me know in the comments. I'd love to find that out after 40 years trying to figure it out. But those, not only are they just made-up titles, they also have a very distinctive Eastern European feel. For example, Zek is the name of a town in Romania. It's stuff like that is just a nice little touch where Gygax gives it a real world feel, but even though it doesn't have a real world origin. So this is as a title. And we have a boss daily of Stoink, and of course that's an allusion to Mayor Daly from the real world in Chicago. And Stoink is kind of an analogy analog to that. But boss as a title is really neat. And then there's a graph. A graph is a German title equivalent to a count. The Graf Zeppelin, for example, is probably the most famous one. And then we have some lords and barons and stuff. So that's the Bandit Kingdoms, have a few interesting examples in there. Then we have Basel, the Margrave of Basel. And the Margrave is a German title. It was given to nobles who ruled over border territories in the Holy Roman Empire. Which is which kind of makes sense in this case for something that's way off on the fringes of civilization. From their point of view, they're fighting and protecting against the Westerners from the Backloonish. Then we have Blackmore, and here's where we have a title which has a real world basis, but a new application, and that is Archbaron. There really isn't such a thing as an Archbaron. There are in the real world. In the real world, there are archdukes, which are independent, right? They don't have a king above them when it has that arch in front of it, and that seems to be the pattern that Gygax is using here. Is that there's a baron who doesn't have another level of feudal obligation above him, and thus that noble gets the arch in front of it, so arch baron. Um, then we have the Bone March, which is formerly ruled by a marquis, which is just a regular noble title. We've got queens. We've got in divers. The leader of divers is called the Magister of Divers, and you would be forgiven for thinking that had something to do with him being a magic user, but it does not, in fact, because he is in fact a 17th level thief, according to the glossography, and but Magister does have a very specific real world application, and that means a master. It's another word for master. It's another word for, but it has a connotation of being a teacher. So, like a professor or something like that, a master of a school. The master's degree is sometimes called a magister degree, depending on where you are. So it's a sort of a vaguely rulership title, but it has this other connotation in the real world, and I think Gygax has just taken it, and he might just be using magister as kind of an antique form of the word master, which is neat. Then we have Ekbir, and Ekbir has a caliph. Obviously, this is a Middle Eastern, Arab, Muslim title, but the caliph had a very specific um, over king kind of connotation to it, right? There was just one caliph, and the caliph was in charge of everything in theory. And that has very real world implications for the world of Greyhawk and how the Backloonish nations are aligned and arranged and organized. And I think just a guess on my part, but I think this is why they changed Caliphate in Ekbir into a different title when they published it recently in the 5.5 Dungeon Master's Guide. When they did the overthing, they changed Caliphate to another title, and of course, obviously, Caliphate has some real world connotations today with Muslim extremism and so forth. The Islamic Caliphate and things like that. So, but that might be the reason that they changed it. But in historically, the Caliphate was a Muslim Arab title implicating that overlordship over other people. We've got kings and queens, and we have a Grand Duke, which is a real world title, and again signifies a lesser title of nobility, the Duke, who would normally have a level of peerage above him, but in this case, the word grand in front of it, just like the word arch in Arch Baron, denotes that it's not really. You're not you are independent of anybody else. Um, then we have for the Grand March we have a commandant, and that of course is a military title meaning commander. The Great Kingdom has an overking, and that in and of itself is pretty cool. He is it's worth giving the whole list here. Um, his celestial transcendency, the Overking of Erdi, that's a new one. Grand Prince Ivid, Grand Prince is another new one. Archduke, we've talked about Arch being used in that context, of Alyssa Ide and Sundi. Suzerain of Medegia. Suzerain basically means ruler. It's another term for that. Suzerainty is where you normally see it. Then we have he's commander of the Bone March, lord of the Sea Barons, protector of Almor and Onwal. That's actually a title that was used in the Holy Roman Empire. And hetman of all the Erde, etc., etc. Hetman is an antiquated term, basically meaning chieftain. It's kind of used in lower civilization, lower technology civilizations as a kind of a clan leader. A hetman is that, and we see that actually used. I'm pretty sure among the gnomes in S4, but I'd have to double check on that one. Then we have the Lord Mayor. And that's a normal one. There's Lord Mayors all over the place, especially in England. Lord Mayor of London. We've got mayors. We've got um, the hierarchs. The dread and awful presences, the hierarchs of the Horn Society. And hierarch is not normally a title in and of itself, but this is another instance where Gygax has taken a word and changed the usage, retaining some of the implications of the real world meaning. So hierarch obviously is related to hierarchy. You know, the people who are above and the people who are below and people who are in the middle. The hierarchs, the implication is that they're at the top of that hierarchy, which is a neat innovation on his part. We've got a king, we've got counts, we've got Lord High Mayor. Okay, you stick a high in there, why not? It doesn't. But then we have Ayu's. His title is Lord of Evil. Okay, Lord will do. Kaoland has the king, who is also a Plar and a protector. We covered Plar in the Bandit Kingdoms. It's made up, but it does have that neat Eastern European feel. In Ket, we have a Bay graph, and this is done intentionally by Gygax, and it's in fitting with the dual nature of Ket, right? Because Ket is right on the border between the Backloonish lands and the rest of the Flanaess, which is primarily Iridian, Sul, and Flan, and it has a mix of cultures and races in Ket, and the titles of its nobility and leader reflects that because you've got a Bey, which is a Turkish title, and you've got Graf, which we've already talked about, is a German title meaning count. So we have the Bey Graf there, and they're roughly equivalent. But I love that Gygax is signaling that this is not just a Baklunish nation in Ket. This is a mixture of cultures, and that's reflected in the titles. And now we come to one of my favorite ones, Medigia, the arch clerisy of Medigia. I'm sorry, the see of Medigia. A see is an ecclesiastical seat of power, like the See of Rome, SEE. And Spideza, the ruler of this, his title is the Holy Censor of Medigia. And a censor has two usages. The first and probably most famous is the office of the censor in ancient Rome. The censor is how you'd pronounce it in Latin. And they were very powerful magistrates in Rome. They were tasked with basically assigning everybody to the voting tribes and so forth. They didn't. There weren't. There were times when there wasn't a censor, and then there were times when there was. It's done officially. It's done every 5 years. To enact a census of the Roman people, basically. The other is in the Catholic Church. There's an office called what is it? The censor librorum, which is basically somebody, a church official who's in charge of checking out books and texts and making sure they're acceptable. So we got a couple of different uh, uh, definitions there, and I think both of them could probably have had an influence on why he chose it for this. In North Province, we have the Herzog of North Province. Herzog is basically just a German word for duke. Then we've got kings. We've got a Zek. We went through Zek before in Onwall. The theocracy of the Pale. Has the theocrat, the supreme prelate of the Pale. So theocrat obviously is a in a theocracy is the ruler of a theocracy, is a theocrat. And then we have prelate again, which is again not a title so much as a category in the real world, but here it's being used as the specific. So that's neat. And in Perrinland, we have Franz the Voorman of all Perrinland. And this is a really cool one because Voorman is foreman in Dutch. Which so it's basically the foreman of Perrinland, which could be interpreted as the first man, right? So kind of like the first citizen almost, which would be in keeping with their very strong independent natures. Um, then we have none there, none there. We have the Lord Baron of Ratic, and Ratic is of course an arch barony, and we've come across this before in other places where the putting the word arch in front of there is Gygax's signal that this is an independent realm, even though the the ruler does not bear a title that you would normally think of as being an independent ruler. Then we have the constable mayor, which is a nice mashup of the two things. We've got a chief. We've got the commander of the Sea Barons. We've got princes. We've got the knight commander, and this is the shield lands because the shield lands are ruled by a knightly order. You know, the Knights of Holy Shielding. So they're because they are a military order. He's got a military title. We've got a king. We've got the Herzog of South Province. We've got different ones there. We've got an earl. We've got the Master of the Hold, Severed Redbeard for Stonefist, counts, dukes, the the Ilkhan of the Tiger Nomads. The Nomads are interesting because they're going to have kind of like these Mongol titles, and Ilkhan is kind of a one of like Khan, like Genghis Khan. An Ilk Khan is kind of a higher Khan. We've got a Pasha, who Pasha is of course a Middle Eastern Arabic ruler, title. We've got a Count Palatine. A Count Palatine is another way of saying an independent count, because a county palatine is a county that is a semi-independent state in the Holy Roman Empire. So when you have a Count Palatine here, the implication is that it's an independent thing, and that is probably to do with the relationship originally between the kingdom of Kaoland and the Ulic states, because they used to be part of it and then they broke off. So it's very possible that before they formally broke off, they were part of the county of Ulic was a Palatine county, meaning it had a higher degree of independence than the other parts of the kingdom. We got dukes, princes. Here's one, the Oricon on Ul, his illustrious ferocity, Drask the Oricon of Ul. Khan, of course, that's a variation of Khan, like we saw before. But Auric Khan, I don't think that has a real world origin, but I might be mistaken. But it definitely has the implication that it's just a degree of being a Khan. The Countess, Duke, the Laird of the Domain, the Valley of the Mage. Laird is, of course, the Scottish word for lord. Um, Voluna has a canon. Voluna, Hazen, the Shepherd of the Faithful. A canon canon in the real world means um, ecclesiastical, means church-like. So when we say he's the canon of Voluna, like canon law is a good way to think of that. But the term canon in this case doesn't have a real world equivalent as a title, but it does carry that ecclesiastical implication with it. So it works very well. And then we have a Viscount, which is a real world title. We have a Tarkhan of the Wolf Nomads. Again, same idea. It's a degree of being a Khan. Certain ones are going to be higher than others amongst the different Khans. We have the spokesman and the freeholder of the yeomanry, which is, neither of them are particularly notable as real world titles, although you could certainly probably find them in some context, but it's obvious what they mean. And then finally, we have in Zeif, or Zeif. I've heard both ways. The Sultan of Zeif, and that is of course, another one of the Middle Eastern Arabic titles of nobility. So there we go. Hope you've enjoyed this trip through the weird and wacky world of noble titles in Greyhawk. If you did like this video, please do like and subscribe. Hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you all later.